Hello and welcome to Business Today Television. I'm Siddharth Zarabi and you're watching our daily markets coverage. And joining me now live is CII President R. Dinesh. He's the chairman of TVS Supply Chain Solutions. Welcome to the show, Mr. Dinesh. The G20 aftermath still being spoken about. Several of the key developments now known fully. I want to begin by asking you to tell our viewers, what do you see as the most central part of the entire G20 summit with regard to India's economy and Indian industry, the future and the positive potential that is likely?
Thank you, Siddharth. Pleasure to be there again with you. I think first and foremost, we have to congratulate the Honorable Prime Minister for actually getting this declaration done in a very comprehensive manner. I think the fact that this presents opportunity to industry in many different ways. First and foremost, the fact that we have talked about the issues which industry or I would call it the MSMEs and the livelihood businesses which are part of industry have to face, and as they go through this sustainability transition, the funding for their requirements, their ability to be ready for the future, and equally importantly, the digital transformation is something which I think is creating very good and interesting opportunities for India and Indian industry. Equally important is, I think, making sure that we have the African Union as part of the G20, and that again makes a huge continent available for as part of the global growth story of bringing together this. So I think in many different ways, I think there are new opportunities which have been opened up, and I don't want to talk about, I will talk a little bit later about the adjacencies to the G20 which has also taken place.
There was a massive B20 summit also, the attendance there showcasing the interest that foreign investors and companies have towards India. The fact that India pulled off not only from the diplomatic perspective in terms of the summit declaration, but so many other bilaterals with different countries, a very substantial follow-up bilateral between United States President and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. What kind of message would it have sent to the larger foreign investor community?
I mean, it's been again very positive. I think first and foremost, let us start with the Honorable Prime Minister's idea of actually having this spread across India. All with more than 200 events taking place, I think we actually had investors and the business community and even the governments of those countries get exposed to what opportunities India offers other than just in the large and bigger towns. Also, it showcased the kind of infrastructure development which has been taking place and which has taken place in India. So I think that in a way has established brand India even better than what it was before. And as you rightly mentioned, even in the B20, we found significant level of interest in not only increasing investment, but also participating in India's growth story. And of course, I don't need to repeat to you about what is happening from an India context. That's one side of it. The second side of it is, like you asked about, bilaterals outside or along adjacent to the G20, I think they have been incredible. If I look at the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, if I look at the opportunities which have been presented by the various strategic government-to-government discussions with Saudi Arabia, with the US, with various other countries, I think they are all opportunities which we from the industry side have to seize on, and as they develop and as they mature, I think they will create even more rub-off benefit in terms of not just companies who are benefiting from this, but also the whole sector which are benefiting from this. And the last and the most important point is ability for India and Indian companies to become part of global value chains, which process has been speeded up by A, creation of the India brand, B, acceptance that India can be a trusted partner and will continue to be a trusted, Indian companies can be trusted partners for global value chains.
In terms of supply chains, and you are perhaps the best person to ask this, how do you see the connectivity corridor providing alternative to Indian companies with regard to market access?
It's a huge opportunity. I mean, if I look at it from, see, if you go back and look at the core aspect by which this government has been looking at growth, I think that one was on the ease of doing business, the cost of doing business. And I think this corridor actually addresses the cost of doing business and cost of doing business globally for Indian companies, and also from the way in which strategically positioned we are to reap the value which it creates for us. Therefore, I think this just does not present an alternative route, but I would call it presents a best value approach to creating not just strategic differentiation, but also a closer link with parts of Europe which we normally don't get associated with, because we tend to look at the traditional route of approach from a supply chain side.
Mr. Dinesh, even as we speak, there are reports that the world's largest company, Apple, in terms of its footprint, is now likely to send out a very strong signal by showcasing a made in India iPhone at its launch, which is expected very shortly. And this comes days after the carnage that the Apple stock saw due to Chinese restrictions. How significant would this be for made in India, make in India?
It's obviously a big step forward to be able to say that India is, as I said, very much there, right center, and in a way first in class in terms of making sure that we are part of the global value chains. But I think it's just one step out of a long journey which we have begun. And I think it's a journey which is, like I said, built on trust, built on relationships, built on competitiveness, built on cost of doing business. And I think those are various facets which not only from a G20 perspective, but also as future opportunities we see going forward. Therefore, for me, I think I would look at this as a journey, and we have well begun in the journey, and maybe this is one more proof that we are well begun in the journey.
How significant is the Biofuels Alliance announcement, especially because India has repeatedly said that it will commit itself to eliminating fossil fuels, a net zero future? How significant is the Biofuels Alliance, Mr. Dinesh?
It's a very, very significant step, and I'll tell you for what reason. I think first and foremost, like I said, this declaration talks about the need to finance the transition, talks about the need to make sure that climate mitigation takes place in the right manner possible. And this is not going to happen if we don't, if we have only like a one solution. So we need to look at multiple solutions to make this happen. And the Biofuel Alliance is one significant step to provide for that mitigation, to provide for a faster ability to mitigate the climate issues which we face. And that is going to happen only on the back of, like I said, multiple steps. Therefore, the Biofuel Alliance helps us, creates value, and also I would call it puts forward an alternate solution, at least in the short and medium term, to mitigate the climate issues which we face. Therefore, as I would call it industry and as opportunity, it's a big step forward.
I want to go back to a remark that you made earlier during the conversation as we wind down this chat today. And this is about brand India. CII for years has been working overseas at the World Economic Forum and at various forums with regard to brand India. And we have seen brand India evolve and how it is perceived. Coming back to that point, how would brand India be perceived now post the G20, according to you?
I think it has got a significant, and I think you mentioned it earlier with regard to the B20. So the fact that we had so many global CEOs come in and look at the opportunity which has been created, spoke about the issues and how they can further support this growth is, I think, a first statement that brand India is well accepted. The G20, I would call it, is the supreme culmination of that, because not only has the Honorable Prime Minister put together the declaration in a record manner and with the full acceptance of others, but it also has showcased that India can be a trusted partner in the geopolitical scenario which the world is going through, and as we face the different issues coming out of the pandemic. Therefore, for Indian industry, I think it's a very big step forward. It strengthens Indian industry's hands. It strengthens the exposure which Indian industry gets. And like I said, trust is something which is integral if you really want to be part of global value chains. And that's something which I think the G20 has helped further strengthen and has established that.
My final question to you, and this is to do with our trade alliances. The whole world is now considering and moving towards bilateral or multi-country alliances. The global trade order seems to have splintered in some ways. Do you think we are now well placed? There are negotiations that India is having with various domains with regard to free trade agreements, but we'll leave that for the policy makers. But as industry, we are well placed to take on such pacts as and when they are signed?
Yes, I think CII's policy has always been that we welcome free trade agreements, and the more we look at opportunities bilaterally, I think that helps us understand each other's strengths or the issues which we will face between countries. Therefore, I think from a trade perspective, from an opportunity to increase investments between the two countries perspective, I think we welcome them. We again the G20 and the outcome out of India being part of global value chains, and India being, I would call it, the significant higher rate of growth compared with the rest of the world, also helps in making sure that these happen, and these happen in a earlier and faster manner.
All right, Mr. Dinesh, I join you in that optimism for India's economy and for the hundreds of millions of our countrymen who need higher growth and a better economic standard. Thank you very much for your time. With that, it's a wrap on this conversation. We'll be back with more. Do stay tuned in.
Hello and welcome. You're watching BTS, that's behind the scenes on Business Today TV. This is a show where we share a sneak peek into the latest issue of the Business Today magazine with all